All right, let's just dive right in. For decades, if you've been following this stuff, the stories of alien encounters can seem totally all over the place, right? But if you really start to look closely at the thousands upon thousands of reports, something incredible happens. A pattern emerges. A surprisingly consistent cast of characters starts showing up again and again. And this is what UFO researchers have come to call the alien pantheon. So today, we're going to meet this cast of characters and figure out what they might be telling us about the universe, and maybe about ourselves.
Now, this is the kind of statement that just stops you in your tracks. This claim was reportedly made inside a private briefing for members of the US Congress, a Pentagon physicist of all people. And it suggests that, behind all the official denials, there's a real consensus. And that, of course, leads to one massive question.
Well, if you ask the people who've spent their lives studying this, there's a pretty strong agreement that we're talking about 3 to 6 primary types of beings that are reported over and over. And here's the wild part. Most of them are remarkably humanoid. And they all seem to be intensely interested in one specific thing, our DNA. When you sift through all the witness testimony, you really do start to see a clear cast of characters. So where do we start? Well, we have to begin with the two most iconic figures in all of UFO lore. They are complete opposites in how they look and act, but, and this is key, they're often reported together in the exact same scenarios. They really are two sides of a very, very strange coin. Okay, so just look at the contrast here. On one side, you've got the Greys. They're small, they're frail, they're totally clinical. And they have those unforgettable black almond-shaped eyes that witnesses say feel like they're looking right through your soul. And then on the other side, you have the Nordics. Tall, statuesque, almost angelic beings that people say just radiate a sense of peace. The Greys are the surgeons, totally detached. The Nordics are the serene guides. But here's where it gets really weird. They're often seen together, apparently working toward the very same goal.
So even though they look and act totally different, both of these archetypes are consistently tied to this one really unsettling idea, a massive genetic program. Witnesses describe these medical procedures, all focused on reproduction, that supposedly lead to the creation of hybrid children. But what's the end game? I mean, is the goal to save their own dying species? Or are they trying to engineer our replacement? We just don't know.
Okay, so now let's move up the supposed chain of command. Because some of these encounter stories don't just describe workers and overseers. They talk about a very clear hierarchy, with beings that are, well, a lot more intimidating at the top. And this whole idea of a cosmic pecking order, it's absolutely central to understanding what happens next. In these stories, the Greys aren't the ones in charge, not at all. They're described more like biological drones or workers, just taking orders from a much higher and frankly more terrifying intelligence.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. It shows that power dynamic that so many witnesses describe. You've got the silent masters at the top, either reptilian or mantis-like beings. Then you have the Greys in the middle, doing all the hands-on work. And then at the very bottom is the human abductee, completely powerless in the situation.
So here's the crucial thing. Even though both of these are seen as the authority figures, their reported motives are worlds apart. The Reptilians, they get linked to ancient serpent gods and all sorts of conspiracy theories. They're described as masters of control, maybe even feeding on human fear. The mantis beings, though, they're seen as these ancient, detached biologists from space, just overseeing humanity's genetic experiment with a cold scientific curiosity. One is about power. The other is about knowledge. All right, let's switch gears to a totally different kind of story. This one is really unique because it doesn't come from those terrifying abduction reports. Nope. This one comes from the sworn testimony of a military insider who says we're not just being visited. He says we have a treaty. Yeah, this isn't about abduction. This is about coexistence, a secret arrangement. The tall whites are described as living and working alongside a very select group of humans right here on Earth in a deal with the US government. And pretty much this entire narrative comes from one man, Charles Hall. He was a former weather observer for the Air Force, and he claims that back in the 1960s, while he was stationed out in the Nevada desert, he had direct, repeated, and often pretty scary contact with these beings. So Hall describes the tall whites as these pragmatic, interstellar travelers who are just using Earth as a kind of way station. They're not here to save us or conquer us. They're here to trade.
They give us advanced technology in exchange for a secure base of operations. He says they're incredibly protective of their children and have tech that's just light years ahead of ours, including, and this is the part that really gets me, the ability to disguise themselves as regular people.
So, we've met the players. We've got the surgeons, the saviors, the masters, the secret allies. But this forces us to ask the biggest question of all. What exactly are we looking at here? What does it all mean?
And when it comes to explaining all of these stunningly consistent reports, you basically have three main schools of thought. And honestly, each one is just as mind-bending as the encounters themselves.
First, you've got the extraterrestrial hypothesis. It's the most straightforward. They are flesh and blood beings from other planets. Simple enough. Then there's the interdimensional theory. This suggests they're not crossing space, they're slipping between parallel realities, which could explain how they do impossible things like pass through walls. And finally, you've got the psychological model, which argues these beings are powerful archetypes coming from inside of us, projections from our collective subconscious, our deepest fears and hopes given a physical form.
And then there's a fourth idea, one that's even more complex. Researchers like the legendary Jacques Vallée have proposed that this whole phenomenon is a kind of control system. It's real, absolutely, but its purpose isn't just contact. It's to manipulate us, to guide our culture and our beliefs through these carefully staged myth-making events. And in the end, that's really the question that hangs over all of this, isn't it? Whether these archetypes are physical visitors from distant stars, or entities from another dimension, or maybe just powerful reflections from the deepest parts of our own minds, their persistence, their consistency, it forces us to admit how little we really know. They hold up a mirror, and what we see in it is either a cosmos far stranger than we ever imagined, or a human psyche far more powerful than we ever dared to believe.